Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Astro Bloom podcast. This is Vanya Banks, your host, and I'm here I met her at a market I did in Collingwood, actually, and we just really were speaking about our work, and we saw so many synchronicities, and I'm just so excited to have her here and for her to share her wisdom with you and for us to really draw some links between what she does, so holistic nutrition and astrology, and how these two can really be connected. So welcome, Katie. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love for you to give a bit of a background on who you are, what you do, and we'll chat from there.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I feel like we had some great chats and just like kind of instantly connected, and we're like within the same kind of world. So yeah, I'm really excited to chat further today. But yeah, I'm Katie. I'm a holistic health coach and I specialize in gut health and IBS. With kind of a background in burnout, anxiety, everything kind of chucked in there. Yeah, I was basically on my own healing journey, which I'm sure we'll get into, but for 10 years, had a nightmare. I was like this medical mystery to doctors. And it basically just made me go on my own journey because I realized it was only me that was going to get the answers and that was going to advocate for myself. Because nobody else is going to. So yeah, so that kind of took me down the holistic route. And then I trained and went back to school, got certified as an integrative nutrition health coach. And yeah, now the last 18 months, I've had my own business, the Glow Getter Method, and I healed myself. I realized how actually simple it is once you have the right roadmap and you're treating the body holistically instead of just being obsessed with diet. Yes, nutrition is important, but everything else that kind of comes within that is too. And I just didn't want to see anyone else suffering like unnecessarily like I did when there's an easy fix. So that's what I do now.
I love that. And I mean, I feel we'll totally get into, anxiety and IBS and all the things, because that's also been part of my journey. But yeah, I think it's also just pointing to like a flaw in, modern healthcare, modern medicine. It's amazing for a lot of things, but it's very compartmentalized. And it really just focuses on treating like symptoms of different diseases. And I don't even really like to call them diseases. I call them like imbalances of the body, because really that's what it is. But yeah, then when you actually start looking at the whole system, sometimes the answer is like so much more simpler. And it does take like a mind, body, soul approach, right? It's not just about the physical body. So I love that, you mentioned nutrition is important, but it's not all of it, right? There's so much to it. So I love that. Just before we get into, into this a little bit further, could you let me know what your big three are in astrology, just so people can maybe, relate to you on that level?
Yeah, of course. So my sun sign is Pisces. My moon sign is Sagittarius, and my rising sun is Aquarius.
Ooh, I love that. There's so much like thirst for like knowledge and betterment there. There's a lot of like getting to the truth of things and inventing a new way for people, right? With that Aquarius rising too. And then Pisces, obviously just such a healer and empath. And I would say like the Pisces energy is, when we think about the Pisces Virgo axis in general, because those are the two opposing signs, it really has a lot to do with like learning how energy can show up and manifest on a physical level in the body, because that's been like part of my journey as well. I'm a Virgo sun, Pisces moon, so it's like realizing that a lot of the like physical symptoms, imbalances like IBS, anxiety, all those things that I had were really just like rooted in my emotional health and my ability to actually regulate emotions and trauma and all of like the childhood stuff, right? So yeah,
It's so connected. And it is so interesting when you start looking into the signs, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. Like, and because I remember like my parents say to me all the time, they're like, are you ever like, you can stop ordering books, like you can stop learning? And I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I love it. Like, I just said, like, I just have this thirst for knowledge. And I think the more you know, the more that you can help people. And exactly as you touched on, like I 100% agree, like it is so, what I've realized is that obviously modern medicine kind of plasters over the problem with medication, things like that. The analogy that I like to use with my clients is, if you had a pin in your foot, would you stick a plaster over it and just kind of carry on walking like with that pain? Or would you take the pin out? Of course, you'd take the pin out, but modern medicine is sticking the plaster over the problem. Whereas the actual
Yeah.
root cause, which is what I'm kind of invested in helping my clients with, is normally emotional. It's normally stress. It could be trauma. And it doesn't have to be like, I spent the majority of my life thinking trauma had to be this huge, awful thing that happened to you. And I'd never had any trauma. Like I had a perfect childhood, is like kind of what I told myself. But everybody has something. Everybody has things that affected them more than they realize. And the majority of that happens by the time that you're 7. So it's kind of really instilled within you. And even society kind of telling you how you should act. Social media. I love social media. I know we're both on social media. It's great for our businesses. It's great for connecting with people, but it's also really bad in terms of comparison and what you should be doing. And are you doing enough? And it's hard on our nervous system.
Totally. I definitely struggle with that one a lot. Like it really keeps you in that masculine energy of like doing, and that obviously leads to burnout and a lot of those things. But I want to backtrack to what you said about, trauma, because I think that's definitely something I focus a lot in my work. In terms of just like childhood needs being met, right? Like childhood traumas. And I love, one of like my favorite teachers on this topic is Gabor Mate. He's a Canadian author. I don't know if you've read any of his books. But he always talks about the fact that like trauma doesn't have to be like a big T trauma. It can be little T trauma. And trauma can literally be you not having your emotional needs met in childhood because your parents' love language was different than yours. Like it's as simple as that. And it really makes me think also about the gut brain axis, because the moon in astrology, which is what I really love to focus on, the moon symbolizes the mother. It symbolizes like our the way that we nurture our emotional needs, and also the way that we are nurtured in our childhood. And there's obviously other elements in a chart, in a person's chart, that we can look into for like a deeper story, but the moon is kind of like the portal to that. And it also houses a lot of the subconscious things that live within us, like the kind of habits and all the things that sort of live within our subconscious minds. And when we look at medical astrology, the moon actually rules over the limbic system in the brain, which houses like the amygdala, right? And like various other parts. And I was doing a little bit of a dive on, the gut brain axis, because I know that a lot of your work focuses on like irritable bowel syndrome and gut health and all of that. And I just love to maybe dive a little bit deeper into, how can maybe like childhood, even little T trauma, potentially affect a person's gut health, and how does this maybe then relate to that emotional well-being? Because I think there's a lot of back and forth between these two, and I think medicine is just starting to kind of like actually get on board with this. And
they're like just scraping the surface, and although it's frustrating, it's kind of exciting to see where it's going to go. And it is so connected. And even in the fact that I've seen that I was going to say the majority, all of the like my clients that have come to me seem to have a certain personality type. Like obviously there's differences, but they are normally perfectionists. They're normally all or nothing. They normally struggle having boundaries, saying no to people. And a lot of that links back to childhood and like what we were taught. And whether it was that you had some little T trauma, you might have had some big T trauma, whether it was that like you might not have even think that you had a bad childhood, but even if you were constantly reinforced that when you did well, like that was amazing, that's teaching you, and that's teaching your body, I need to do well because then I get praise. And it sounds so silly, but I think it's things that we don't think about, because like that was one of the things for me. And it was almost that it grew as I got older. And obviously I feel like when you go from in the UK, you go from primary school to secondary school to university, it's quite structured. You know what you're doing. You've got your exams. Obviously, that was always a stressful time for most people, but you know what you're doing. There's like this set path. And then you kind of go out into the world and you're like, who am I? What do I want to do? I mean, that's a whole nother topic in itself that I feel like we're kind of very much guided towards, the house, the 2.4 children and things that you should have. And I feel like that is starting to change, but that's pressure as well. But going back to kind of what we were talking about, yeah, like a lot of that is kind of ingrained in us, in that if I don't do that, what will happen? Because I'm so used to doing well, getting these accolades. There are other examples as well, but I found that things like that, for me personally anyway, really fed into this perfectionist, high achiever, overworking, and then that was a nightmare for my nervous system. And then, as I'm sure you know, but we'll just, in case the listeners don't, if your body is in the stress response, which we're only ever supposed to be in for really short moments, it hasn't changed since hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we're basically supposed to be running from the tiger, running from the lion. All of our bodily resources go to our brain so that we're alert, and for like any more predators, like where's the lion coming from, and our limbs to run. So at that time, digestion is not important. Whatever's going on with your hormone production isn't important. Hair growth, things like that, not important. But that should only get shut off for a short amount of time. The tiger goes, the threat goes, the body calms down. Today, that doesn't happen. Like, we get in, for some people it does, for some lucky people it does, but I would say the majority of us all deal with stress. Some of us deal with it worse than others, have more of it than others, but we're all dealing with it. And whether it's a stressful email from your boss, all the WhatsApp messages that you haven't caught up on, all the things that you know you've got on your plate for tomorrow, like your kids, this, that, like the list goes on. And so and I picture it like a light switch. And when you're in the stress response, which is your sympathetic nervous system, you can't be in the rest and digest response, which is your parasympathetic nervous system. So when you're constantly stuck in this stressed state, one, it's really bad for your body in general. It's like a domino effect. But the main thing, obviously, in my area of expertise and work, is that you're not digesting your food. So what happens is the food in your stomach, it either sits there and it's not getting all the digestive juices, stomach acid, things that it needs, because your body's prioritizing the emergency, which might just be a horrible email, or it literally just flushes out whatever's in your system. So this obviously leads to, you can either kind of be constipated, you can have diarrhea, you can have gas, you can have bloating, and that's where that comes from. And a lot of us just get so obsessed with, what did I eat that caused this? And that nutrition, don't get me wrong, is very important, and it's a large puzzle piece, but the first part is making sure that you can actually digest in the first place. So yeah, sorry, that was quite a long explanation.
No. I mean, it's a big topic, right? Like, it's hard to summarize in a
It is. And obviously you can tell it's something that I'm passionate about, because I think it's the missing puzzle piece for most people. Most people get so obsessed with supplements and nutrition and exercise, and it's like, none of that is going to work. Like, I tell my clients, I'm like, you could eat McDonald's every day, like, it doesn't matter, because your body isn't digestion, and when it hasn't been doing it for a long time, it leads to malabsorption, leaky gut. Like, you're not getting the vitamins that you need anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, when we think about that, like, common phrase of like rest and digest, right? Like, you need to be rested to digest. And I was also reading a bit about like that gut brain axis, and obviously the vagus nerve being like a big part of that. Like, it's literally the nerve that sends signals between the brain in your gut and the secondary brain, they call it, I think, in your gut.
And more signals actually go from your gut to your brain than from your brain to your gut. Like, your gut, they call it your second brain. It can run by itself.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think there's another common expression that someone kind of mentioned to me at one point. It was along the lines of like, what are you not digesting, like, emotionally, right? Because it's like,
I love that.
Like, you need to digest your emotions, because when we don't process our emotions, because emotions are energy in motion, right? And again, ruled by the moon. So knowing your moon sign in this case and understanding how emotion shows up for you and how to actually move it. Are you a fire moon? Are you a water moon? Like this all kind of determines how you should be processing emotion and what you actually need to feel emotionally secure and taken care of. But emotions are energy in motion. And when they stagnate in the body, when we're not dealing with them properly, when we're not allowing ourselves to get back to that parasympathetic nervous system, then it actually leads to blockages in the system. And then obviously your digestive system can't function properly, right? Because you're just not in the right state for that to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't know that. And then once it makes so much sense, it's like light bulb moment for myself, all of my clients, like my family and friends who I kind of preach it to. And I'm like, you just need to get this stage right first. And I say just, and that's a word that's so annoying because I know so many people are like, oh, they've been told it's just IBS. There is nothing just about it. Like it completely takes over your whole life. But healing your nervous system can be fun. It can be, there are parts of it which can be dark if you're kind of going into the more trauma side of things and therapy and things like that. But a lot of it, as I'm sure you agree, it's like it's moving that energy. And I like to see it as self-care. So especially when it's the vagus nerve. And I just like to include different self-care practices, whether it's something I've got really into at the moment, which you guys might not think is as much self-care, but I'm addicted to it and I love it, is cold plunges.
Yeah.
Which really helps your nervous system. But it's also things like dry brushing. It's things like baths with Epsom salts, gua sha. Like you can incorporate them into your everyday life. They don't take long, and it's getting everything moving. And even vagus nerve, it's dancing, it's singing, it's laughing. It's like, yeah,
Breathing, literally,
yeah.
like deep belly breaths, yoga.
Yes, breathing. I can't believe I haven't mentioned that one. Like literally, it's my favorite thing. And that in itself is another thing that we haven't learned. And it's that if you look at babies and if you look at dogs, I remember when I first heard this years ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And they've got these big, beautiful bellies when they're sleeping that they can just see them breathing, and it's all in their belly. And we've almost taught ourselves. We kind of have this stressed breathing. And as humans, we tend to breathe from our chest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not doing anything for us. Like that's bad for our nervous system. That's bad for our digestion. And I think a lot of it with women as well is that, especially if we are suffering with bloating, you're trying to pull your gut in, right? Like you're trying to look slimmer than you are. That creates its own problems. But so we're breathing from the chest, and then breath work is so powerful because it teaches you to breathe how we should, which is from your belly, which is having this big full belly and longer breaths. And it's something that becomes so normal once you start doing it again. And something that my clients use, I do it in the shower, I do it when I'm stressed, because no one has to know that you're doing it. And a few rounds of breath before meals and eating as well is like the biggest hack, because it's switching that switch that we were talking about back into rest and digest, and making sure that you're in that parasympathetic state so you can digest your food. But yeah, breath work, game changing. And I think that's just it's an area that I'm seeing already that there's getting more research into, that people are just doing more and more. And it almost sounds too good to be true because it's so simple.
Yeah. But like you said, we've gotten so far away from like how we actually should be breathing. So, I mean, I'm not surprised. At the same time, I've also, like, I am a yoga teacher. I've been practicing yoga since I was 17. So like, even though I wasn't sort of intentional about my yoga practice, in the sense that like I was doing it to improve like my anxiety and my IBS, like it just felt good. So I did it. I kept up with it. But now, knowing the things that I know about yoga and breath work, it's like that was such a crucial part of my own healing journey of dealing with, like pretty bad anxiety, dealing with the resulting IBS, I would say, from that anxiety. Because I had been down that road too of, the story that you share on your website that I'd love to like get a bit further into as well, of, going to all of the doctors and being like, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't feel
Yeah.
100% like myself, right? And I want to just feel like myself again. And
Yeah.
basically just being told that, like, no, that like there's nothing wrong with you. Like, it's in your head, and
Yeah.
it's you just have anxiety. But it's like no one ever explained to me that anxiety can result in physical symptoms, right?
No.
Like, it was like you just have anxiety, so basically it's in your head that you feel this way. And
Yeah.
it's just, I kind of got to a point where I think a lot of people get to, where you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to live at this 80% for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
because that's like clearly no one can help me. But then unintentionally, somehow it led me to astrology, to the moon sign, to self-care. Like, self-care is like my biggest thing, because the self-care that we practice through our moon sign is that ability to like heal our childhood trauma, to meet our emotional needs, to create that like security and safety within the self, and to
Yeah.
be able to regulate our emotions, and
Yeah.
therefore like lean into that parasympathetic state, right? So I love
Yeah.
that you mentioned, various self-care practices, because that's very much like, what my practice looks like too, and like the work that I do with a lot of my clients as well.
Yeah. And I think, because when you think about it, like the practices that we're kind of talking about, they're so grounding and they get us back in our body. I think we've become so, as you touched on, like we've become so disconnected from our body. We're living in our heads the whole time. Um, and we have got so far away from how we were supposed to live. Like, we're inside with artificial lights, like we're at screens most of the time, like we're sitting down most of the time, we're not even breathing how we should, we're not eating the foods that we should, they've all been processed and altered and things like that. So simple things have become a lot harder for us to do. We kind of have to go out of our way to
Mhm.
get back to them, and like how we were supposed to function. But once those things start becoming habitual, like it becomes easy again. It's just a little bit of an uncomfortable period, and sometimes that's why it's easier to have someone kind of coach you through it. And if you're anything like me, like I like to know the science and the reasoning behind things. Then like my logical brain is like, cool, okay, and then I go with it. But yeah, and yoga is definitely a big one for me as well. Yoga, Pilates, walking. And I've realized that it's just all of those things that just get me back in my body and get that energy moving, and remove any like blockages and stress that there is. Because I've realized that there's a great quote, and I'm not going to be able to remember it exactly, but it's something like you can't think yourself out of like a thinking problem. Like you need to move it, you need to change things up. Like, if you haven't got results doing what you're already doing, something's got to change.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it's comparable to another quote I heard of like, you can't heal in the environment that like hurt you, right?
Yes.
Like, so
Yeah.
like it's like you have to shift something in your environment, something within yourself, for something to change, right?
Yeah, because that's
Yeah.
a big one as well, because I think so many people are like, oh, I just want to get back to me. I was as well. I was like, I want to be the old me. Like, I want to be able to eat whatever I want. I want to be able to go out with my friends, blah, blah, blah. And then when I realized, like, I kind of got to the root of like, okay, what's causing my symptoms? What's causing my stress? Like the trigger points and the root causes. And a lot of it was my behavior and lifestyles and habits, and not having the boundaries and always saying yes to things. And I realized, like, if I wanted to sustainably feel good and continue to kind of be this healed version of myself and thrive and be healthy, I couldn't go back to that old me. I had
Yeah.
to become this new me, which still has parts of the old you, but it's almost, and I feel like that probably ties quite nicely in with astrology and the moon and everything, but it's almost like this death and rebirth of yourself. So I think it's this big mindset shift of, actually, you don't want to go back to you, but we want you to feel great, but this new version of you, it's almost like I said, it's like Katie 2.0.
Yeah, it's like it's an evolved version of you, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've gone through the underworld at that point. Like, you've gone
Yeah, like you've gone through the
through
crappy like
your,
caterpillar stage, and now you're like
uh,
blooming into this butterfly.
yeah, like you gotta go through like you have to face the fears, and some
Yeah.
people's fears and shadows and all these things are learned through their relationship to their body. Like, it depends on your chart, right? But like
Yeah.
a a lot of lessons can show up through health for
Yeah.
certain people and for certain signs. Like I would definitely say, yeah, like Pisces, Virgo, like a lot of the earth signs as well. If there's a lot of like sixth house energy in a person's chart, like I always think of, body things. So yeah, it's like I feel like you end up being that better, more healed version of yourself. So you can
Yeah.
never really go back to who you were,
No.
because it was the habits and the behaviors and the patterns that kind of led you to where you landed in the healing
Exactly.
journey.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what can be such a blocker, because it's hard, right? Like you don't want to have to change like your habits and your lifestyle behaviors. Like that's harder than going on a diet. Like it might not
Yeah.
sound like it, but it is, because those things are ingrained. And like there are tips and tricks and hacks and ways of doing it
Yeah.
that make it a lot easier on you. And I found as well, like a big change that we make, kind of working throughout my program, is ditching the all or nothing, because I found that we tend to be like these
Yeah.
go-getters. That's like where my glow-getter name came from, that want it all now, and we're used to being high achievers, we're used to getting results, so you want to apply everything, and that just doesn't work. If you want to sustainably do it and to be able to keep this up, it's like slowly a couple of things each week that you
Yeah.
introduce, change. And also it's much less overwhelming for your nervous system, because ironically you stress yourself out more if you try and do too much at once, so then there's no point you doing it.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think it's a very masculine approach to like,
Yes.
whatever change it is that you're trying to make in your life, because it doesn't allow you to kind of surrender to what actually is and what you're actually capable of doing. And it does come from those ingrained perfectionist tendencies and things like
Yeah.
that, would have maybe been rewarded in childhood or throughout your
Yeah.
life experience. And it is really hard to get out of that
Mhm.
perfectionist um kind of state, right? That like high achiever state. But that's definitely one of the things that also comes up with my clients a lot, because I am a recovering people pleaser and perfectionist. So so one of the things I always love to suggest to my clients is like, just do things at like 50% of your capacity. I know
Yeah.
it's going to feel really icky and like awful at first, and you're going to feel like you're failing at life, but just do it and see what happens, because
Yeah.
that was the biggest thing for me. Is like, I I went through grad school and all the things, like just being again high achiever, feeling like I needed to like be the best at everything. And it just got to a point where I was so burnt out, and I was also so uninspired by the work that I was doing,
Yeah.
even though I ended up then taking a job in that field because I had to pay off my student loan.
Yeah.
I got to a point in my job in like 2018, I think, where I just kind of really just crashed. Like I just couldn't keep things up at the rate that I was going. I felt like I just didn't feel good. I was super low energy, like all of the things, all the classic kind of examples of just like burnout. And I just started doing less. Like, and my 50% was still better than, like
That's what's
the
wild.
other 80% of
Yeah.
people's, like the efforts that they put in. So it's just interesting when you start to actually practice that out in the world, and essentially see how little effort you can put forth to do the
Yeah.
job that you need to do, because honestly you are your own worst critic, right? Like
Yeah.
people do not notice the
No,
difference.
like the little tiny things that you do. And it's just crazy. And I think as well, it can lead to a lot of procrastination, is what I
Yeah.
was seeing, what I was noticing. And because you were almost waiting for the perfect set of circumstances, or just worried to start, like almost like worried to put pen to paper in case it was wrong.
Yeah.
And you're just making things so much worse for yourself, and you're stressing yourself out so much more. Your deadline gets way smaller. And this is what I was seeing like time and time again, is that people were procrastinating, putting so much more pressure on themselves. Yeah. So two phrases that I like to use, and I know like I find it so hard to begin with. It's definitely something that's still a work in progress with me as well. And I know it's something that my clients find hard to begin with as well, but is done is better than perfect. And progress is like progress over perfection. Because I think that consistency is something that just so many people struggle with. But actually taking like one small step in the right direction every day is so much better than taking 10 steps one day and then having 2 weeks off because you're knackered.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And yeah, I would say like kind of letting go of perfectionist tendencies is going to be a lifelong process. Like it's like
Yeah.
any other ingrained, behavior pattern. It's something you're always kind of peeling the layers back on and understanding, where did this come from, and
Yeah.
reprogramming that in your mind and all of the things. But I think it's about the actions that you take, like you said, towards that, like
I
every
think it
day. And
is.
those things really add up in the long.
Yeah. And
They
it really resonated. I think taking that action, doing it just 50%, as you were saying, and realizing like what's going to happen. Like nobody's arrested me, nobody's shouted at me, like I haven't got sacked. Like actually, my work was still way better than other people's. Like, and it's teaching yourself, teaching your nervous system,
Yeah,
actually, nothing went wrong. That's safe. It's safe because
yeah,
that's what it is your mind's like, that's not safe. That's not safe. Like, we need to do what we've always done because we've been safe. And that's what I found so interesting as well, is that your nervous system, your mind, it prefers the known, and it doesn't care if that known is awful, if that known is horrible. You've got chronic fatigue. Like me, I had chronic fatigue. I didn't even realize it was chronic fatigue. I was just getting tireder and tireder. I had chronic fatigue. I had chronic stomach issues. My hair was coming out. I had rashes. Like I was really like, it was like the valleys of the valley, and my body would my mind would still rather keep me like in that because it was safe, because it knew what to expect. Like,
mm-hmm.
and that's almost even because I know when people say, oh, how could you, people who've had trauma and like ex-boyfriends and things that they've stayed with, and it can be so easy on the outside to be like, oh, why are you staying with them?
Yeah.
It's because it's the known, like, and your mind can't comprehend what might be the other side of that door, and it could be worse.
Totally. No, and then there's so much that's like a whole other topic, right? Of like
Yeah.
what lives in the subconscious mind, and sort of the neural pathways that we have there that are, yeah, they're kind of set. They're not, I don't want to say set in stone because they're not set in stone. You can
No.
reprogram them, but they've been triggered so many times that it's kind of like the path of least resistance, right?
Yes.
And the least or the less energy your brain has to use to sort of deal with certain scenarios in life, the better it is, because it's really just trying to keep you like, having enough energy so that when a stress response does come up, it has energy to respond to that properly.
Exactly.
But that, knowing that, yeah, your brain is just trying to keep you safe,
Yeah.
and having that insight can really help you kind of maybe have a different outlook on, why you might not be leading a situation, or why you might not be feel ready to do things a different way.
Yes.
Not to say that that's not going to come, but I think the way to train yourself out of that is taking those like baby steps, right? Step
Exactly.
out of your comfort zone a little bit each day, and then those things are really going to add up, right?
Yeah. And I think it also, that like having that mindset almost helps. It did for me anyway. Like I did a post on it yesterday, ironically, but one of the big mindset changes for me was like working with my body instead of against it, like realizing that actually, although it wasn't going the best way about it sometimes, like my body and mind only ever wanted me to be safe. And when I knew that, it's almost like it's the surrender, right? It's like the relax, like the shoulders down, like, okay, like I don't agree with how it's going about it, but like I understand it now, and I
Yeah.
understand why it's doing it. And I understand that it's not just kind of causing me hell for no reason. And even that, I think a lot of this, and it's the theme that kind of seems to be coming up throughout this, is literally is surrender, but also going back to that feminine way, which I think we are so in our masculine. And even as we're talking about like the self-care practices and the getting back into your body, that's all the feminine. And I think we've just got so far away from that. And we're like, do, like next step, next step, next step. That, yeah, I love the word surrender. It's one of the hardest things to do, but the more you can, as you say, step by step, you'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's I think that's just like it's a societal issue of
Yeah.
the fact that we live in a more masculine world. But I'm so happy to see that there's way more, people in general who are leaning into their feminine, whether they are,
Yeah.
whatever gender they are. We all have feminine in us, and really like trying to regulate their nervous systems and just practicing being and being creative and connecting with their body, right? Because the body holds so much wisdom. Like
Yes.
it's communicating to you all the time, right? So it's really easy when we're going through difficult times with our bodies to be like to feel like a victim, right?
Yeah.
If we're dealing with illness or whatnot, to feel like a victim and to like, kind of hate on our bodies
Mm-hmm.
and wonder like, why is this happening to me? Like, why are you doing this to me? But at the same time, that keeps us in a really disempowered state. And I think it
Yes.
applies to just relationships and other situations in your life in general, like not just your relationship to your body, but relationship with other people, your relationship to your job, your relationship to your community, like any circumstance it can be applied to. Because
Yeah.
if we are stuck in that victim mentality of like, why is this happening to me? You're literally just giving your power away, and you're saying
Yeah.
like, I am completely powerless in the situation, and I have no say over what happens to me because basically, I'm a victim here.
Yeah.
So my hands are tied, right? And
Yeah.
then it's really easy to get stuck in that state
Yeah.
because you're essentially putting that energy out in the universe saying like, I
Mm-hmm.
can't do anything about this, whereas you can do something about it, right? Like
Yeah.
you can start to heal your nervous system. You can face, maybe needing to leave a relationship or a job, or like make the baby steps
Yeah.
to do those things. But it is really hard to make that transition. It's hard to step out of the unknown, or out of the known into the unknown. Yeah. So
Yeah.
do you have any other tips on, yeah, like maybe steps that you normally would recommend to clients around this topic that we've been talking about, like kind of stepping out of that comfort zone? And yeah.
Yeah. So the first kind of chunk of my program Glow, and I think is what makes it different. And it's basically, it came from my journey and all the kind of learnings that I had and going back to school and things like that. I'm realizing how important stress in the nervous system was, obviously everything that we've just been talking about.
Mhm.
I'm realizing that if we kind of had it flipped in this stress response, then everything else that I was going to try with my clients, like there was no point. And that's why nothing else had worked for them. So a large focus of the beginning of the program is resetting the nervous system. So it's like get a nervous system reset. So we delve into what is your negative self-talk, and kind of journaling, and I have lots of prompts for them, and we kind of dig into that, and also different areas of their life as well. So we call it the circle of life. So I think obviously health is going to be an issue if people come to me, but I think they're so stuck on what diet do they need and can I give them the perfect diet. And we actually look at 12 different areas, and within that is their finances, their relationships, their career, their joy, spirituality, movement, a ton of different things. And I get them to rate where they are on that scale, and it's obviously, so it's like a circle. So
Mhm. Like a
and they
holistic health model.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it's really kind of powerful to see though, because you can kind of end up looking like a Pac-Man. But ideally, you want the circle to be full, right? But if they're not happy, the dots are closer to the center. So you might have a really small circle, you might have something that kind of looks like a Pac-Man. And it's just really easy to see kind of in black and white what areas of your life are lacking, what areas of your life could be causing you stress, unhappiness, that are kind of contributing towards your symptoms. And I feel like that you can literally just see like light bulbs going off, and they're like, wow, like I didn't realize that. And it's almost like some of the sessions are kind of almost like half like talk therapy, because I'll be asking
Yeah.
like difficult questions, I'll be probing, and we'll be trying to, it's like I'm your own like personal investigator. We're kind of trying to figure out when the symptoms started, what was happening just before that, or like in life in lead up to that, to kind of contribute towards this. But yeah, a lot of it is working on your limiting beliefs, your mindset at the start, and then flipping them into kind of more positive affirmations, having more of a morning routine, I think having me time is so important. And I think the more symptoms you have, the more ill you get, and the more anxious you get, I feel like the less time you want to spend with yourself and the less time you want to spend in your own head. And don't get me wrong, like I know there'd be times obviously where like my IBS and fatigue and everything had got so bad, like I didn't want to leave the house, but I'd constantly be distracting myself. I'd be watching Netflix, I'd be doing this, like I wouldn't be sitting down and
You
trying
don't
to
want to be present. Yeah.
exactly, like I just wanted to be anywhere. I wanted to be out of my body, if I'm honest. Like I didn't want to be, I felt like I was trapped in my body, and I was trapped in my head, and I wouldn't have really wanted to been alone with my thoughts. I don't think that's actually, it's just so powerful. And getting that down on paper, journaling, we work through a lot of different things that could work for you, because I know that journaling is not for everybody. But yeah, so I think if you could apply one thing, it's having some kind of, you don't even have to call it a morning routine, call it morning me time, whether that's 5 minutes, whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's an hour, whatever you can give it. If you could just get up 5 minutes earlier. And I like to do something by mind, body, and soul every morning. And I have kind of like this, I call it like the pick and mix list that my clients will trial, they'll see what's for them, because obviously we're all by individual. I realize meditation doesn't work for everyone. I would encourage people to try it more than a few times, because it is hard. That's the point. But I do have like other alternatives that they can kind of go to, if it's just not for them. And yeah, so I say like do something with your mind, body, and soul, even if just to start with it's like 2 minutes of each, whether it's like a 2-minute meditation, it's like writing 5 gratitudes, it's going for a walk around the block, or it's just going barefoot in the garden and grounding for a bit. And then you can build that up. So at the moment, mine looks like I get up early. Obviously, I've been doing this for a while, so you don't have to take this as gospel. Anyone that's listening, don't worry, you don't suddenly have to have an hour routine. But I do 20 minutes meditation. At the moment, I now do tapping for like 10 minutes. And then I'll do 20 minutes yoga or 20 minutes Pilates. And then I'll go for a walk, because that's just what makes me feel good. But I've definitely built that up over time. Like if you haven't got the time, you can have much smaller. But the main reasoning for doing this is for just having time with me. Like I don't have my phone on, like that is the most important part, like phone on airplane mode until the end of that, because I like to talk about something like I like to call as a stress bucket. And I feel like when people come to me, their stress bucket is overflowing. And when your stress bucket is overflowing, we know that your nervous system is in disarray and your gut is not going to be good. And so many of us, we're not emptying our stress bucket anymore. Like we're not going outside, we're not going in nature, we're not doing it like meditation, yoga, journaling, things that kind of help us relax. We're just constantly in this masculine go, go, go mode. And when you pick up your phone and you scroll, like it might seem harmless, but the first hit of dopamine you get in the day is something that you crave throughout the rest of the day. So if you start your phone with the scroll hole, we've all done it, I've done it many, many times, you're then going to be craving your phone throughout the day. You're constantly checking it. But 2, you're then suddenly everybody else's, like what's going on in the world, and there's just awful things going on. If you're checking your emails, your mind has just gone from sleep and rest to suddenly on again, and you almost need that reset period, which I think is so important.
I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, my relationship with that definitely ebbs and flows. I think, there's times where I've been able to do, hour meditations in the morning. And lately with like going full time with this, it's, my stress bucket is a little bit fuller than it normally has been.
I totally agree. With launching a business, it becomes more stressful. And I think it's just having something that I realized that I have something that I can dial up and dial down. On the mornings, I can do an hour. I do an hour. On the mornings, I only have 10 minutes. I make it work in 10 minutes.
And I think that's the whole thing we've been talking about around like surrendering into that feminine of like not needing the all or nothing, right?
Yes,
not like,
exactly
if I can't do 30 minutes of yoga and a 30-minute meditation, then I'm not going to do anything at all. It's like, no.
That used to be me.
Right. And it used to be me too, right? Because I think it's just much more of that masculine mentality. And my approach to yoga as well, because that was one of my main healing modalities for a very long time, was always, it was much more yang. Like I was into like the power yoga, you know, vinyasa, hot yoga, all of these things. And I was just like, so yeah, like go getter about
Yeah.
it. Right. And it led to, and not that that led to burnout, but other circumstances in my life led to that burnout where I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't have the energy. And so
Yeah.
the only thing I had energy for was like 10 minutes of yoga a day. And I just started to shift my mindset around that being enough. Like I
Yeah.
got on my mat today, even if it was for 10 minutes, like I still did something to move my body, right?
Yeah.
I did a 10-minute meditation today. I wish it would have been an hour, but it's still 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
10 minutes
And
of
that's
like
all you
going
need.
within.
Yeah. And there's all these studies as well, which prove that like it's way better for you to do a shorter amount of time consistently than it is just to do like an hour meditation once a week. Like your mind and body don't need much. Like obviously the more that we can give it, the better. But like they actually don't need that much of our time to kind of have that reset, to have that, because it just flips the switch, right? But it's so interesting that you say that, because I was so like that. It's almost, unless I was doing like a yoga workout that I felt like was like burning some calories, I was like, what's the point? Or unless I could do my full morning routine, my mind would literally be like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And that has just been, and even it's something that really recently has shifted where I'm like, where I'm really comfortable with just doing a little bit and being
Yeah.
like, that's enough.
And it takes time, right?
Yeah.
Like you and I have been doing this for years, obviously,
Yeah.
and we've built up those morning routines. We've built up the things that we know make us feel good. But when you're just starting out, it is really important to just play around with, first of all, different modalities, right? When
Exactly.
my clients say, meditation is really difficult for them, especially because I do a certain type of meditation with my clients. Like I do more like visualization, like almost like Reiki self
Yes. I
meditation.
love the visualization stuff.
And I mean, for some people, it's really difficult. Like they maybe are not visual people, they can't really picture it in their minds, right? So it's like trying different styles of meditation. And if meditation is still not for you, and you're very much a person that's like in their head, right? If you have a lot of air energy in your chart, if you have a lot of fire energy in your chart where you're much more yang naturally, then maybe breath work is the thing for you, because that allows you to focus on something, focus on your breath, but it still gets you into that meditative, like vagus nerve stimulation state,
Yeah.
right? Into that parasympathetic. So there is a lot to be said for like trial and error, and these things take time
Yes.
and commitment, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be just a little bit each day, just trying to surrender more into that feminine of like being with what is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think not having to have like a set routine, because like I know I made it sound like I do, but like sometimes I'll get up and I'm like, I really don't want to do that today, or like I just want to go on a walk. And one of the things that I love, that I feel like really makes a difference, because it just kind of gets me into the zone of it, is I have like this, I call it like this meditation yoga playlist that I listen to. It's just like chilled music, and I just put it on in the morning and it just calms me anyway. But also is when I go for a walk, like if I could only pick one thing, I would probably go for a walk. And I listen to a podcast, and like I have like a list ready to go of like inspiring podcasts, and I come back from that walk like feeling like I'm like floating on air, like I'm ready for the day,
Mhm.
and I haven't looked at my phone yet or anything like that. So it doesn't have to be hard, and you literally don't have to go on a half an hour, an hour walk. You can walk around the block.
Yeah, totally. There's something to be said for just like the healing power of nature in general. I
Yeah.
know that was a big thing for me, and continues to still be. Just getting outside, like just feeling like, smelling the trees, and
Yeah.
like being near water, and maybe like grounding for a little bit barefoot, right? There's just something about the ability of the earth's energy, right? It's been proven, I mean,
Yeah.
to help us get into that parasympathetic, to reset our energy field. And I think that's all it really comes down to in the end, is like dealing with our energetic and emotional body as a base. Like I think it's that
Yes.
bottom up approach, right?
Yes.
In therapy, like a lot of the therapies that actually deal with that body centered approach first are really good at, so talking about like eye movement desensitization and
Yeah.
reprocessing, yoga therapy, things like that, that work with the body and the nervous system first before delving into like, the talk therapy and whatnot. 'Cause even though talk therapy is amazing, a lot of the traumas and the dysregulation in the nervous system actually ends up living in the body, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
Yeah, and so interesting. Yeah, I could talk to you on it forever.
Yeah. So we are coming up to the end of our hour here, and I am wondering, actually, I have one kind of selfish question for you,
Yeah, of
and then
course.
I'd love to open up the floor for you to share, any offerings that you want to share with people, any last bits of advice, anything that you'd like. So I've always been really curious about the fact that, so talking about the gut-brain axis, right?
Mhm.
So as a kid, when I was 6 years old, I actually had this like chronic E. coli infection
Mhm.
in my kidney because I had like a kidney defect. And it caused like all these like urinary tract infections and stuff like that all the time. And so I ended up being on an antibiotic for 4 years.
Oh my gosh. No wonder you had IBS.
Right. So that's why I wanted to ask you about. I was like, I feel like my anxiety literally resulted. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in my childhood too. Like, I immigrated from Serbia when I was 10. Like, there was like bombings there at that time. My
My
family
gosh,
left
yeah.
Bosnia when I was 2. And obviously, that was during the Civil War too. So I know there's a lot of like
A
big
lot going on,
trauma
yeah.
too. But yeah, it always makes me like whenever I read about the gut brain axis, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense because
Mhm.
I legitimately killed everything in my gut for like
Yeah.
4 years. And this was at the time where, no one really knew much about that. There was no such thing as like probiotics or
No.
whatever. Like, I think my mom, made an effort to like feed me yogurt and stuff, but there wasn't that much focus placed on that. So yeah.
No, still now there isn't. Like, unless you kind of go to a functional medicine doctor or someone more holistic, naturopath, health coach, something like that, you will just get prescribed antibiotics and they won't say anything about it. And obviously you trust the person who's in charge, like, because they know more than you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that makes me so mad, and it's something that I see so often. And even for me, it was something that triggered my initial journey, because that's the thing, there can be like one kind of initial cause, whether you might have got there anyway with kind of being a stressed person, things like that, but it's all pieces of the puzzle, right? And like that's how we try and get to the root. But I got a stomach bug in Egypt, and we believe that was the very start of like my stomach issues. Now, don't get me wrong, I had always been like a more I wouldn't say nervous child, but like we would now say anxious. But I was I'd always get like, before something that was big, like if I had to give like, I don't know, a speech or something, like when I was a kid, like there was some big thing that was coming up, I always had like an upset tummy, as we'd call it. Obviously I was little, like, but I'd always get sick with it. And so I know that like and obviously with my signs and everything, and I've been looking into human design lately, I know I'm a highly sensitive person. So
Yes, I
that
see
tracks,
sense.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there was that kind of lingering in the background. But yeah, I took the Egyptian antibiotics, and then ever since that, my gut, I suddenly had IBS, and then everything went downhill. Stress
The
and
tipping
everything.
point, right? Like there's some
Exactly.
kind of tipping point with the accumulation of all of the things that have already kind of.
Yeah, because what happens is that so antibiotics they're there to decimate bacteria, but they also decimate your good gut bacteria. So I like to see, so your gut microbiome should ideally be like this. I always picture it as, I'm quite a visual person, but like this like rainforest that's like full of color and like beautiful flowers. And then I feel like once you've had antibiotics, especially for 4 years, bless you, like it's just basically like tumbleweed in there. And then
The desert.
yeah, and it's much more likely that the bad gut bugs, sorry, can take over. And then that's when we kind of start to see problems. And then the really ironic thing is that I could talk about this forever. I'll be very quick. I only say one more thing, but is that like our gut microbiome thrives on variety, but the worse that our microbiome gets, the more food sensitivities that we have. And I remember being so confused because I was like, like I was doing better with like junk food than I was with fiber and fruits and veggies, which I loved. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. But antibiotics, they're not good for your gut. If you can take a probiotic with them, take Saccharomyces boulardii with them, and eat all the fermented things while you're taking them, and just make sure that you're supporting your microbiome while you're taking the antibiotics. And I'd say question it when someone's putting you on them, like, do you really have to be on them? And if sometimes you do have to, and like modern medicine definitely has its place, but sometimes if they're doing it as like a precautionary thing, I'd question it.
Yeah, for sure. I've had times where I think like doctors have wanted to put me on antibiotics while I'm like have a viral infection, and I'm like,
yes,
this makes no sense because it's a virus, so why am I on antibiotics? And in that case I'm like, no thanks, like I'm good. I'll just drink lots of fluids and take my herbal supplements and just
exactly,
like you can't do anything else for viral infection,
no.
so yeah, I love that advice. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom today. Like like you said, I would definitely echo, like I could talk to you about this forever, and there's like we should definitely do a part 2 sometime to dive even deeper. But I'd love for you to just share where people can find you. I'll obviously link your website and things like that in the show notes, but if there's things that you want to share right now or last pieces of advice, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's flown by. It's been great. It's been a great chat. So you can find me on Instagram at glowgetter_x. Yeah, I'm pretty active on there. And then my website is www.theglowgettermethod.com. It will be in the show notes. And yeah, so I have a signature 3-month program called Glow, and it basically takes you through everything that we've been speaking about and heals IBS, which I can't believe I haven't actually managed to say yet, but IBS, which you'll see on my Instagram, I very much believe is BS. Like it's a made up term. It's so a syndrome in itself just means, so it's irritable bowel syndrome. Syndrome means a collection of similar symptoms. So it basically means the doctor has no idea what's wrong with you. And as you'll know from our chat today, like there are root causes, and IBS isn't a forever diagnosis. It's not a noose around your neck like how we all believe that it was. I believed that for years. I thought that I couldn't get better. So yeah, the program takes you through resetting your nervous system. It takes you through all the nutrition and lifestyle changes that you need to make to get back to you, but you 2.0, and to be able to feel like you again, to not have FOMO, to feel good in your clothes, to be able to go out and eat, to be able to cook things again. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you, love to chat to some of you guys, and yeah, look forward to maybe chatting again, part 2.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I know everyone's going to love this episode, and I'm so excited to release it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.